What's up, everybody? So we're going to be out in the other shop doing this Shop Talk Tuesday, kind of like we did last week, where I'm forging during this process. And in this video, we're going to be getting the blade finished just a little bit more, and then we're going to get the handle done. And hopefully by the end of this video, we'll actually have the full forged knife shape. That's the goal for this. And what I'm going to be doing a little bit different than last week's is last week's I was forging and then talking, then forging, then talking, and it took about 45 minutes worth of video to be able to get that all out. What I'm going to do differently on this one is we're going to go ahead and get into the forging, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop myself either down here in the bottom corner, top corner. I'm going to be in one of these corners talking while you have all the forging happening in the background. I will be talking about an actual topic that a person asked me on the Facebook Messenger, and his name is Greg Paul. I'm going to leave his Instagram down below. Definitely go check it out. Give it a view on his stuff. He posts actually a bunch of videos that I think are pretty cool. So go check out his Instagram. Now, for one, the questions that he was asking me, I was thinking to myself, okay, a lot of these questions are stuff that you get from books, but not everybody's going to go out and just buy a bladesmithing book to learn some of the simpler terms that we use every single knife making video. You know, we say, hey, we're annealing this, hey, we're tempering this, we're heat treating this, we're normalizing this, and we're not really explaining what those things are. So in this video, I'm going to be explaining those things. Now, I'm going to go ahead and minimize myself, and we're going to pop up the bulk of this being the forging. But while I keep talking to this, just pay attention to all this stuff where you can actually see the forging and everything like that. Now, when it comes to the different terms for this, you're going to have, we're going to start with things that you would do first and go all the way through the end of a knife build. So let's say you're trying to make a knife out of a file. If you're making a knife out of a file, one of the things that I suggest is annealing the file so that you can then work with it and it'd be a little bit softer. So what annealing actually means is we are taking the hardness and we're annealing that out and making the steel softer and easier to work with. So that's typically what you're going to do at the beginning. So there is a difference between annealing and normalizing, especially a difference between annealing and tempering. So we would start off by annealing the steel, and there's going to be times whenever you are going to have to anneal steel that you would purchase from a regular knife steel company, like Texas Knife Maker Supply or Jantz or something like that, because sometimes those steels, even though they're pre-annealed, they still have a little bit of extra hardness to the edges where they've either been hot cut, laser cut, that a lot of them get cut in different ways, and it ends up hardening the edges that you would try and cut through with a portaband saw or something like that. And if you try and cut through those with a portaband saw, you're just going to pretty much shear all the teeth off your portaband saw blade and make that blade useless because the blade is not as hard as the steel you're trying to cut. So you would anneal that piece of steel. Now, whenever I anneal my steel, I typically bring it up to the non-magnetic, so 1420 degrees, or a more orangish color. We're not bringing it up to a bright orange or a glowing yellow or anything like that. So it's not going to be as dull as a red in your forge. It's going to be closer to a little bit of an orange color. And I bring it up to that, and then I leave it in the forge to let it cool as the forge is cooling. And that's going to let it cool as slow as possible. Some people put it in a different type of medium to cool it slow as possible as well. Me personally, I just use the forge because it's already there and I don't have to buy something else to stick it in to let it cool slowly. So if I'm going to anneal something, I'm going to take that and I'm going to cool it down in the forge as slow as possible, and that's going to make it to where it comes out as soft as it can be. Now you've got to be careful with annealing some tool steels and things like that, because there are steels out there that are air cooled. So whenever you bring it up to non-magnetic and pull it out of your forge and put it on a vise or something like that, thinking, okay, I'm gonna let this cool as slow as possible and it's gonna be malleable, it's gonna be soft. But what ended up happening was you actually heat treated that steel and now it's hard, because that steel is a air hardening steel. We've got a lot of people who try and drill through some of those steels thinking, okay, well it is annealed, I should be able to drill through it, but they'll take and they'll drill a little bit and then pull their bit up and start drilling again. And whenever they do that, in that little bit of time between drilling through it, the heat from the drill has started heating up that steel, and as soon as you pull it up and let it sit for a second, it has now hardened. So whenever you go back with that drill again, you're trying to drill through hardened steel. So you've got to do a little bit of research on the steel that you plan on using. You know, if you're using simple 1080 steel, all you got to do to anneal that, or even if it's files, which are typically about 1095, you can put them in your forge, bring it up to non-magnetic, turn your forge off, let them cool, they're going to be annealed. Now when it comes to normalizing, which is going to be something that you would do before heat treating. So normalizing, what that is you got people that say normalizing, you got people that say thermocycling, you got different versions of these things, but when it comes to normalizing, you are going to take your steel, and people have different methods of this. You're going to take your steel and you're going to go through typically about 3 rounds of this. And with normalizing, what that does is that kind of refines your grain structure. So it makes it to where whenever you get your last heat to go into the quench, you're going to get a nice fine grain structure. You especially want to normalize if you're going to be forging the steel. So if it's something that you have forged out, you want to normalize it, because you just made all of the grain structure in that steel go nuts because you brought it up to forging temperatures, and then you beat on it, you moved the molecules all throughout it, and what you want to do is you want to take all this stuff that's going crazy and you want to normalize it so that all that stuff relaxes and pulls together, relaxes, pulls together, relaxes, and then pulls together, so that then whenever you heat it up on its last heat and go into your oil, everything comes together and it's nice and smooth, as opposed to all those molecules are confused as to where to go, if you can imagine that. So we typically normalize almost everything that we work with. If you're me, even if I buy my steel from a knife supply company, I still normalize it because I want to know exactly what's going on the inside of my steel. It's a personal preference, you don't have to do that. But if I do it on pretty much every single knife, it's just going to be ingrained into my process, and I'm going to go ahead and keep doing it. So normalizing, what I do, and this kind of varies a little bit depending on what I'm doing, but I'll typically bring it up to, let's say I'm working with 1080. So I'm going to normalize that after I've forged it. I'm going to take it and I'm going to go up to about 1600 degrees on the first heat. So 1600 degrees, and then I'm going to pull it to the edge of my forge opening, and I'm going to let it cool right there. I'm not just taking it completely out and putting it in a vise. I'm letting it cool on the edge of the front of my forge so that it still has a little bit of heat and it can cool down kind of slow, but still not as slow as being inside the forge. And then on the second heat, I'm going to bring it up to about 1500 degrees. And all we're going to do is then again bring it to the edge of the forge, let it cool. And then once it's completely cooled, I'm going to go in 1400 degrees, or about non-magnetic. So heat it up to that point, let it cool, and now my knife has been normalized. And after that, I'm going to go ahead and bring it up to the proper temperature. And a bunch of knives still have, they have different heat treating temperatures. So for something like 1080, I would bring it up to the proper temp, which is going to be right at about 1520 to maybe 1550 degrees. I'm going to take it up to that, and then I'm going to quench it in something like a canola oil, a peanut oil. I prefer peanut oil. I like that. Don't do motor oil. You can get a lot of toxins in the air. I see a lot of people quenching motor oil. It might be the thing that you have access to at that point. That's fine, but try not to do that because you're going to be breathing in toxic air whenever you do that, or chemicals and smoke and all that. But now that is annealing and then normalizing. So even though the processes are pretty similar, because you heat it up and let it cool, they are different processes. So annealing, you heat it up, you let it cool as slow as possible. Normalizing, you go through different cycles of heating up and then medium cool, heat up, medium cool, heat up, medium cool, refine that grain structure, and then that leads us into heat treating. So when it comes to heat treating, there's a lot of different ways to heat treat steel. A lot of steels have different types of heat treating. The easiest one, again, is going to be like that 1080, where all you got to do is go to non-magnetic and then heat just past that. And for me, it's about an orangish color. Get that. Go ahead, quench it in 120 degree peanut oil. Now, when it comes to other heat treating processes, this is why you need to do a little bit of research on the steel you're working with, because a lot of people will tell you, get some 1095, work with that. Well, 1095 requires a soaking process. So that's another term that a lot of people don't really talk about. What they mean by soaking is whenever you get up to your actual temperature that you want to be before you quench it, which could be 1550 degrees. You want to go ahead, bring it up to that temperature, and you want to keep it that consistent temperature throughout the full blade for about 10 minutes. That is a lot easier with the heat treating oven than it is with the forge. You can do it in a forge, but you're risking a little bit. If you put something like a baffle in your forge, like I do with that piece of angle iron, you could also use square tubing if you want to. That way the flame is not directly blowing on the actual steel itself, and you can kind of modulate where you're at and make sure you keep that consistent temperature for as close to 10 minutes as you can. It requires a lot of work, but it's a tricky steel to use. It's not as forgiving as something like 1080, 1084, 1070, 80 CRB2, 5160, 15N20. All of those steels are very simple steels to heat treat. But whenever you get into 1095s or some of the tool steels and things with like vanadium and chromium and all that, even though CRB2, has some of that in there, it's still a very easy steel to work with and very easy steel to heat treat. But so you got your heat treating, which that is the process of bringing the steel up to temperature and quenching it in your quenchant, whether it be oil, a brine, like a salt waterish mixture, or just water, or using plates and doing it like stainless steel, and then all of the different things. Just make sure and research what process your steel needs, and make sure that you can do that with the tools that you have at your disposal. So there's heat treating and soaking. After that, once we've hardened and we've done our heat treating process, you want to make sure that you temper your steel. Now, a lot of people use toaster ovens. You can use a regular home oven, or if you're brave enough, you can temper it with a torch. You can temper it with your forge. You can do pretty much anything that you need to. The goal is to get a straw-colored finish on the blade when you're done. That is the temper that a lot of people are looking for. If you get to a blue finish, you've most likely tempered the hardness too far back. But you can be tricked into thinking that before you go into the tempering process, you want to clean your blade with like acetone or something, because the oils from your hands can actually leave it to where it looks like you went too soft with it, because you'll see those bluish and purples, but some of that time it's because of the oils in your hand that have made it that color. But when it comes to tempering, the process that you want to do is you want to do your heat treat. So you want to heat it up, get it in the quench, and then within an hour, you want to do it very soon after your heat treat. You want to get it into the oven and start tempering it. You do not want to go to the next day and temper it that day. It kind of just is useless at that point. Will it help a little bit? Maybe, but it's not doing the process that is actually going to benefit the knife the way that it needs to. So a lot of people temper different ways. And what tempering does, the point behind it, is you are taking the brittleness of a heat-treated steel and making it less brittle. So you're going from a super hard steel to a workable steel. By workable, I mean something that you can bang on, beat on, chop with. You can put some torque on it. You can use it for all of the different things that you would use that particular knife for. Because if you do not temper it, you are going to have something that might be around that 65 Rockwell, and what that's going to do is it's going to be as brittle as a file. If you just took a file right now and just dropped it on concrete, there's a good chance that that file is going to snap in half. You know, it's so hard that it can cut steel, but it's too hard to be a tool that you would chop with or slice with or flex or anything like that. So what you do is you temper that hardness back a little bit so that you have something that is usable but can still keep an edge. And that's why we're going for that straw color. Now, when it comes to tempering, you got a lot of people that have different processes for that. You've got people that temper for 375 or 400 degrees for 2 hours. You got people that do 375 degrees for an hour. You got people who do 400 degrees for an hour. You got people who do all kinds of different temperatures and different times based on how they like their hardness to be at the end of their process. Me personally, whenever I first started doing knives, with my oven, I was doing the 375 degrees for about 2 hours, and I was doing 2 1-hour cycles. So I was bringing it up to the 375 for an hour, and then letting it cool, then bringing it back up to 375 for an hour and letting it cool. And then I started doing a little more research and realized that there's no point in doing the 2 different cycles, because you can just do it for 2 hours if you're going to do that. It's the same process. You can do it for 2 hours. Or you can do something like what I do. I personally don't like to make my knives as soft as a 2-hour 375 degree cycle would be. So I fluctuate between 1 hour and an hour and 15 minutes at 375 degrees. I get a nice straw finish for that, and part of that might be because of my particular little toaster oven that I use. That is the length of time that I know that I need to get the edge retention that I want. And different steels are going to have different tempering cycles that are suggested for them. So that's another thing that goes into whenever you think, hey, I'm going to use 1080 and I'm going to work with that. I suggest for that first year, if you're just getting into knife making, that you only make knives out of 1080. I know that you'll see a lot of YouTubers go, hey, I'm doing 1080 this week. This week I'm doing 15 and 20. This week I'm doing 80 CRV2. Next week I'm trying stainless steel. And you might think that is the progression. That is how fast you need to go through your knife making, but it's absolutely not. You want to pick a steel and use that steel. My go-to is 5160. I also prefer 80 CRV2, now 15 and 20. I do a lot of 10 series steel, so like your 1080s and stuff like that. But they have similar heat treats that I can do with the tools that I have at my disposal, so I do that. I do not plan on getting into stainless steel for quite some time. I might do a stainless steel cladded knife, but I don't plan on doing a stainless steel knife until I get a heat treating oven, because you typically need a heat treating oven to do stainless steel. But when it comes to the steels that you're going to work with, and you're going to try to figure out how to actually utilize the annealing process, or utilize the normalizing process, or how you're going to heat treat it, how you're going to temper it, does it need soaking, does it not need soaking, those terms that I was talking about, you're going to need to see what those steels require. And there are tons of forums online. All you have to do is just Google heat treating 1080, heat treating 80 CRV2, heat treating 1095, tempering 1095. If you Google the terms that I've explained in this video with the type of steel you plan on working with, it'll tell you what those things require. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave simple descriptions for each of these things in the description below. So if you actually want to check out what annealing means with its actual definition and all that, I'll go ahead. I'm going to have those in the description below so that y'all can actually copy those and print those off if you want to. So yeah, hopefully this video was helpful for y'all, and hopefully y'all enjoyed everything that was going on around me. But guys, alright, so I'm actually going to jump in here and finish out the video in the main shop because I wanted to actually show y'all the knife. So we're going to look at the template that we made. So this was the template right here. Little drop point, recurve, nice contoured handle. Well, this is what we were able to forge. So that right there, I'm holding it by this clamp because the knife is actually still pretty hot. I just got done going through a couple of the normalizing cycles, but that right there, absolutely awesome. We got our recurve going out through the belly, nice upsweep, drop point, a little bit of arch to the spine. We got our nice contoured handle. So that was forged all the way in. We got a nice distal taper going through to the tip. I really am enjoying how this knife looks, and I'm happy with the overall outcome of it. I want to know what y'all think about it, and I also want to know what y'all think about this format. So we didn't do the 45-minute video like we did last time. This video was a little bit different. I haven't really done the whole pop up a video and have me talking in the bottom corner thing yet. So what did y'all think about that? Do y'all think that that was an okay format, or do you think I should have just had the forging going in the foreground and just had the voiceover going in the background instead of the video popped up down here? I want to know, was it too distracting? Was it just enough? Let me know what y'all think. So guys, that is the end of this one. If you would, give this video a thumbs up, share this video or one of my other videos, and if you have not yet, subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell so you get notified of all the stuff that we have that's coming up, because we've got Mocha Megane Kumai action happening. I think that once I finish that build series, we're going to have more people trying that, because I think it's going to look pretty awesome. So guys, hopefully y'all looking forward to that. Guys, thank y'all for coming by. Thank y'all for spending your time with me. Y'all have an amazing day. Y'all stay safe out there, and I will catch y'all next time.